Today on Great Chat, we talk about the wave of VC pitch horror stories founders shared on Twitter over the past week. What does it say about this moment that these usually behind-the-scenes tales are being aired publicly? I'm Ashley, and I'm joined by Helen and Angela. Great Chat is brought to you by Mercury, radically different banking loved by over 300,000 entrepreneurs. We use Mercury to run this podcast and love recommending it to other founders and fund managers. It's free to get started. Try it for yourself and visit mercury.com to learn more and apply online in minutes.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hi. Ashley, did you survive Knicks mania last night?
Kind of. I moved recently and I'm now across from like a very enthusiastic sports bar, which is actually perfect for me because I get all the energy of game night without actually having to participate. And so I sort of like secondhand Knicks fandom. But yeah, now it's Knicks in 5, guys. And I've seen some new rhymes.
They're good.
My mayor's Muslim. My bagel's Jewish. Christian Dior, Knicks in 4. And now there's like my cream cheese is chive.
Oh,
Knicks
I thought
in 5.
I saw my president is still alive.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. Yeah.
Oh my
But
gosh.
no, I
well-
was following. We watched the game from San Francisco on our couch. And no, it was like vibes were so good. It was so exciting.
All sorts of like narrative violations too, right? Because prior to this game, I think the stat was no one had ever come back 0-2 to win a game. So like, you know, history being made all around.
Oh, Spurs. Yeah. No, we're like locked in on Knicks mania. I wonder how many millennials have been telling their kids like, the Knicks haven't been good since mommy was your age. Because I have said that 15 times in the last week. Anyways, but yay, go Knicks, I guess, just for the story. The Spurs have been good so many times in my life. So I'm just sort of like,
Yay, Ashley, for not being trapped in a Midtown Manhattan office building, like stuck at work.
Oh my gosh. That would be a nightmare. And especially if like the reason is President Trump. That's insult to injury. So yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it really just confirms my worldview. I never go to Midtown.
Last week, New York, I was there. It was New York Tech Week. And it sounds like I escaped some windstorm that came on Thursday or Friday. But when I got back, I couldn't stop talking about how like it was like the best time ever because like Knicks mania, everyone was so happy. The weather was perfect. It was New York Tech Week. So people were just like running around and there were all these fun events. And it just felt very good. And then apparently there was some windstorm.
I think this is getting dramatized. Like on Saturday evening around 7, there was like a brief, it was a thunderstorm, but it mostly manifested as wind. And our next door neighbors were having a housewarming. And we watched them all run inside because it was so sudden and so intense. But it was over very quickly. So
I forgot if I mentioned this, but when I went to Tokyo last week, there was an actual typhoon that hit Tokyo. So like all of us like went in person to meet in person. And then we ended up taking a full day of calls in our hotel room because there was a literal typhoon. There was a literal typhoon going through Tokyo. So we couldn't actually get to the office. But yes, no, New York, I was there 2 weeks ago and the weather was amazing and everyone was out in Central Park. And it was one of those perfect New York days where I was like, yes, SF can't compete with this. Just like the energy, the vibrancy. I think those are few and far between, but it was an amazing, like perfect New York afternoon.
Well, and remember, we had an especially shitty winter. And so I think we're all just like really, we're bringing like the early spring energy into June because no one takes this for granted. It was so bad for so long.
I also think this is the first week that I've seen more headlines about like sports than AI. Like the Knicks have revived the New York vibes and have put AI like second place in terms of headlines.
I have seen zero talk of robots taking their jobs.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good sign. Athletes are still safe.
For now. Yeah.
For now. Yeah, our grandchildren will be saying back in the day, it was humans playing basketball.
Great Chat Enterprises, like another idea for us is we will start the first robotic basketball league.
I don't think they'll be I don't think it'll be robots. I think it'll be like simulations, like little digital simulations. But
sounds so boring.
I thought that about esports, but that's like, I guess, the biggest sport in the world now, which is sad.
Esports sound boring to me too. So I'm just not, I'm not of the people. Speaking of being of the people, like we're all Hunter Biden stands now, right?
Yeah, I had like a unfortunate Twitter comment kind of take off, which was just a comment about how he's really hot and nobody's calling that out. And I'm really sick of it. And then I woke up to many notifications and some follows.
I missed this. I want to see this.
I need to Google what Hunter Biden looks like now.
I am bracing myself for some sort of like crypto coin grift reveal.
I hope not.
I am not like he's running. He's 2028. Like, no, I don't think so. I think there is something waiting for us, and it's unsavory of the crypto variety.
And I think you're just afraid to believe that something can be good and uncomplicated in these modern times. I'm looking for your tweet. Where is it? Was it a reply?
It's a reply. Nerdy escorts. Thoughts on nerdy escorts?
We went from Hunter Biden to nerdy escorts.
That is sort of a logical, segue. But
to me, the narrative violation was I thought AI girlfriends are taking off. So where is their room and where is their time for like actual IRL escort activity?
Well, maybe
it all comes
both.
Back to the honeypot.
Maybe this is how you scale yourself, right? Like there are only so many in-person hours that you can give. But then you train your bot to provide companionship in the downtime.
Okay. Also, I'm sorry, Helen. This was the first thing that came up, and I don't know if like hot is the word that I would use.
That's not a good picture. No, that's not a good picture.
Okay, not to take us back, but
Angela, the thing that makes him hot, because I agree with Helen, is that he's like the opposite of a looks maxer. It's like he's like shooting these like selfies from like below his like
with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and the ashes falling down.
He's just a guy and a guy who's like made a lot of bad decisions in life, but seems to maybe be a good person at his core. But he doesn't care that he's hot, and that's like so refreshing in our warped culture today. So take note, Gen Z men. This is at least what old millennial women want. I don't know. I can't speak for the Gen Z girls.
Yeah, what a counterintuitive thought. To be hot, you should do the opposite of being hot. That being
you
the
should not
opposite
care
of...
about being hot. Hasn't that always been the thing for men, though? I don't know. I mean, we've been through this with like metrosexuality and like other waves. But I didn't mean to sidetrack us.
Back to the honeypots, right? It was like this is the ultimate moment in time for attractive females to capitalize because there's all these like young male AI researchers, and you can just like honeypot a lot of information. It's sort of like a new form of corporate espionage almost. And maybe it's not exactly escort, but I think it's like the new frontier for espionage. Like, China can just send a bunch of attractive East Asian women to, socialize and honeypot with these AI researchers and get a lot of secrets. That was going to be like another Great Chat Enterprises side hustle, but it kind of crossed the legality border and morality threshold
Angela.
too much. But
wait, so you're saying that Forbes article was also like a counter narrative to this other thing where like the escorts are being trafficked from overseas?
No, I just mean that like there's a large population of young men and like it's just a ripe opportunity.
Angela sees a business opportunity. She's like, hot women plus lonely men with access to the best frontier models and research seems like a good way to get some information.
I take the counter, which is I think that digital experiences will continue to be the preferred way for people who are like 996ing and just basically living in front of screens.
Have Have you invested in any AI girlfriends yet, Helen?
No, I don't think it's healthy or good for society, but I think that I just see that being a lot.
The escorts are a social good then. They're like countering this trend.
Yeah, you could even say it that way.
Well, what an episode. So many counter narratives.
It's also funny because it just made me like every generation or every wave has their version of this. Like when I was in my 20s, the like scandalous thing that was happening was at the Rosewood down in the peninsula, there was Cougar Night. And like I used to like go to Cougar Night with friends to watch. Like we were actually like it was like a zoo exhibit.
That is such a simple time. That is so great. Yes, I did the same thing. I did the same thing.
Scandalous at the time because I was in Palo Alto, so I was on my way home.
There was the gift shop,
right? And you'd like buy the jewelry, and then
right inside the restaurant, basically, like on your way into the restaurant. Yeah, exactly.
And that's how like these transactions would happen. Was the man would go buy jewelry for the woman, and then the woman would like return it or something at the end of the night, and so there would be no cash exchanging hands. I guess this was before crypto, so there weren't good ways to exchange in that capacity. So, anyways, it's just funny because like that was a really big like that was a scandalous, exciting story, and now there's this. And I think the most interesting part of this story, which I have no idea how like true this is beyond like the small population they interviewed, was that the woman who is the sort of central figure in this story turned to escorting because she saw that AI was going to replace her eventually in her entry-level finance job. And she did the math and she saw the writing on the wall. And so it's like, everything has an AI angle. Everything has multiple AI angles. It's like exactly. The AI engineers are 996ing. The poor entry level hot women are like worried about their future, and so that thus is born a new generation of escort services.
It feels like she consulted Claude on how to construct that narrative for this like meta narrative of AI coming for all of the jobs except for
it's like that's like
being an
catnip
NBA
for
player.
a reporter. So she.
Oh my God.
I see the movie happening already. Like who's going to be cast to play her? Like this is like Hustlers, like AI version.
Okay, just to up level the pod a little bit. Every week there is new IPO news. And this week it's that OpenAI has confidentially filed and joined the party. So now we have 3.
Is it possible that OpenAI, even though they filed technically after Anthropic, or they said that they did a confidential filing, that they could still do a regular S1 and go public before Anthropic, right? Like it could really just be
everyone has to do a regular S1. This is just like the alert but that you would like. They could
do that.
They could beat Anthropic to the roadshow. Yes.
So anything can happen.
Anything can happen. I don't think anyone will beat SpaceX because I think SpaceX is later this week.
That train I think has left the station. That train has left the station.
But everyone's going to be tuned into the SpaceX market open.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm excited. I just feel like I have a front row seat, and it's going to be wild because it's Elon and it's data centers in space and like the biggest IPO of all time.
Well, what were some other IPOs? So like Bending Spoons, I saw IPO. They filed their S1 yesterday.
They actually released their S1. Yeah, so they're further along than Anthropic and OpenAI in the process. I think you don't have to do the tweet that both OpenAI and Anthropic did around alerting people that you've confidentially filed. You usually do that to get ahead of leaks / sort of like warm people up. And it gives you a chance, even though you're not supposed to do this, to start like shaping the story in the background. And actually, even if you don't do the sort of we've confidentially filed, you are still beholden to quiet period rules. And so it's not like you lose anything by doing that tweet except alerting people. And so it is funny that, both Anthropic and OpenAI have gone that route. It makes sense because, of course, this was going to leak, but also it's sort of part of the jockeying for the order of IPOs. But yeah, Bending Spoons like straight up dropped their S1. And this will be an interesting one because I feel like this is a kind of a fascinating company that's been buying up like old internet companies, making headlines through that. And the most notable thing that I saw, which is what I shared in the group chat, was from their S1 that they said, as a positive, nearly all of our businesses and functions are led by people in their 20s or 30s, most of whom had little or no work experience prior to joining Bending Spoons. And I just thought that was such an interesting, proactive story to tell. And also interesting in the context of what their business is, which they're sort of buying up these like dying legacy businesses and breathing new life into them. So they're trying to it's almost like they're trying to bring the sort of classic startup, first time founder, ignorance is your biggest edge energy into sort of the PE world. But I don't know. Any thoughts on Bending Spoons?
I mean, I think they're proud owners of AOL. They've kept that brand and company alive, you know. So that's impressive in and of itself.
Well, I think Bending Spoons is doing what a lot of like people have been saying that they're going to go do over the past year. When it's like, I want to do like, you know, buyout. I want to buy a bunch of cash flowing businesses, make them efficient with AI, and flip them. And it's like there are all these memes of like, new grad MBAs buying laundromats and things like that. It's like, well, I'm doing this on the sort of like software side. And it's a world that I do not know and I'm not familiar with. So I feel like I've been learning actually quite a bit watching Bending Spoons. The thing that I thought was funny that I saw last night was Perplexity said that they're going to they're going to go public in 2028 no matter what. Like no matter how these IPOs this year goes, yeah, just no matter what. Was it 2028 or 2027? I think it was 2028. And I thought that was an interesting thing to put out there from a comm standpoint.
It's such a funny way to like join the party. Like
maybe it was that. Maybe it was like, hey, don't forget about us.
Well, I remember back in a much like an earlier wave of Box filed to go public in 2014. We didn't actually get out until 2015, but there had been like a drought of IPOs for a while. And I think like probably sometime in 2013, there was an interview where someone was like, could you go public next year? And Aaron was like, we could. And it became a headline. And then it felt like every other CEO realized that if they ever commented on IPO timing, and I'm not saying we kicked this off, but like it was like collective realization that you could get a headline. Like if you called your shot, right? Like you could, because like, you know, like reporters and editors are like dying to put, like, especially there were some smaller like ankle biter companies. There's this one called Ignite that was like a file sharing company. Every year they announced they were going to go public. Guess what? They still haven't gone public. But anyways, it was funny because it was just like instant way to insert yourself into the conversation. And so it's kind of how I read this Perplexity. Like, don't forget about us. We're here. And they're just calling Rashad a little further out. But oh my gosh, don't ever say no matter what, because anything can happen. But also maybe it doesn't matter because it's not like anyone's going to hold them to that.
Yeah. I mean, I read it on Tech Meme, so thanks, Gabe. But it was like the last thing I looked at before I went to bed. But so I didn't dig into details on exactly how that was worded. So please don't quote me on it. But it was that was the gist of it.
Yeah.
One thing I shared in the group chat was the OpenAI like letter or blog post that Sam shared, I think yesterday, late afternoon after the sort of news had settled around them confidentially filing. And I thought it was very good. And a question I asked was, what would have happened if they shared something like this, or they were a little bit more proactive with this sort of messaging earlier? So like 6 months ago or 12 months ago. It was basically like, what are we focused on? Why do we exist? What to expect? Who are we for? It's like answering all the big questions, right? And putting it in sort of like almost like a prospectus format, right? That is to be absorbed by investors, but also like I think he was pretty intentional about sharing that on Twitter so that it was, absorbed by his users and developers and customers. But I really do think that this was with a lens towards investors just because of the moment, right? Like you can't really deny that that was the primary audience.
It's funny. I read this so differently.
And Mac said she thought it sucked. So, clearly very different thoughts.
Yeah, Mac, if you don't join the pod, we're going to give your opinions for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like you were at one end of like, this is great. Mac was like, this is shit. And I was in the middle. The rest of the post to me was like trying to correct the broader narrative around AI being both like, just it's going to automate everything. It's going to take all the jobs, but also it's going to, a lot of the conversation heading into these IPOs is like this massive wealth inequality that already exists and is going to be exacerbated. And that the thrust of the post that I took was that like Sam wants AI to be for everyone, and he wants it to be like an equalizing force versus like a further polarizing force. My assumption was that was why you liked it, Helen, because we didn't like have a chance to really get into it on the chat. I thought the message was good. I just thought the details on how that happens or what that looks like were scant, and we're at a.
I don't think that was a. I don't think that was the right place to share the specific details. But I actually thought one of the reasons it was good was because of the level of specificity where they said, this is what we're focused on. And now anything they do, I am going to neatly bucket into one of these three categories. And if it doesn't fit into one of those three buckets, then it's going to feel off to me. But like, to me, this is kind of like, you train your audience, you say what you're going to do. It hasn't felt until this moment that they were like in control and that they were like being intentional about things. And this felt very intentional, which is why I thought it was great. Not because I thought it was an excellent piece of, writing or a vision that was like so inspiring.
I didn't hate the post like Mac, but I was, when I saw the title and I saw the lead in, I was like, oh, there's going to be some teeth to this. I also think, yes, it's geared towards investors, but it's also geared towards a retail audience, right? This IPO is forcing OpenAI, just as it's going to force Anthropic and SpaceX to care about like a broader audience of investors and future holders of their stock. And I appreciate, like, it seems like actually both OpenAI and Anthropic recently have been trying to correct the sort of the pervasive narrative of the past couple of years around like all white collar work will be automated. You're going to get intelligence the same way you get your water and your electricity. It'll be utility, like these messages that have not been resonant.
Well, okay. So I guess maybe in contrast, I thought Anthropic has said nothing and their talking points continue to be revolving around like AGI for good and ethical, AI. And respect for sticking to a message, like consistency, but like it didn't do what I thought OpenAI did, which was make it feel inclusive and sort of at least attempt to directionally show where, how we all participate in this version of the future. I have been saying for the last couple of weeks with Anthropic, like, does the average person know that Claude and Anthropic are the same company? Does the average person know what Anthropic is? Is Dario Amodei a household name? I don't have those questions for OpenAI. So I actually feel like this letter and this moment was well executed. And I'm not like an OpenAI stan. I want to say I have no horses in any of these races, but
yeah.
I thought it was like, or maybe it was the contrast of I feel like they've been especially chaotic and seemingly, like the executive leadership shakeups, like all of this speculation on other people leaving. Like maybe it was just in contrast to that, like how intentional.
Yeah, I just love that we had such different responses to this post where I was like, this just feels like bland messaging with I mean, I guess they were specific in the sense that they wanted to build AI that could do AI research and someday everyone will have personal AGI. But like, I also, on a more meta level, enjoyed reading it, knowing the level of scrutiny that any new communications has to go through once you've confidentially filed, like, because you're in the quiet period, and like wondering how many lawyers looked at that post and what was like pared back. And maybe part of the reason why I was disappointed by the substance of the piece was there's been all of this like chatter in the background about Sam trying to get the US government to buy part of OpenAI in a way to like pass on some of the benefits to the American public. Like there are some like bigger moves that have been analyzed lately that like maybe are more creative and bold. But we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one. Angela had to bounce for a work thing. So this is not her recusing herself from this particular topic. But one of the things we saw in our feeds all last week, but then like with surprising staying power. I feel like usually when there's like a Twitter conversation that's happening, it's like one day, maybe 2 days. And I think this one is still going.
No, I think that it was dead. And then the Cloudflare CEO bringing up receipts extended the moment. Yeah. So I feel like we got another week of juice out of this one.
But let's say what it is first, which is the founders sort of airing their like VC pitch horror stories on Twitter. And it was kicked off by Greg Eisenberg, who shared a story about pitching a top VC firm for his Series A. And one of the GPs was just like fully asleep for like 30 minutes and no one acknowledged it. And I think it was, sort of like absurd. I don't think he thought he was kicking this off, but it was like absurd enough. And if you pitched enough investors, you probably have some crazy stories yourself. And so a bunch of other founders jumped in with like their crazy stories. And so we just got this like wave of mostly anonymous, but some naming names, to your point about Matthew Prince, of tales from the like pitching in the boardroom. And so I think this is interesting on two levels, maybe more, but the two that come to me are, one, these stories normally do not get told.
There's like a social contract that
social contracts, but also like a power imbalance that maybe tilts you towards it not being in your interest to share. And so like, what does it say about this moment that founders were sort of like openly airing these grievances? A lot of the weirdness of pitch meetings, I think, flows out of how decisions are actually made in VC firms, especially these bigger VC firms. And that's often very opaque to the founders who are pitching. And so maybe we can get into both these things. But do you want to, since you brought up the Matthew Prince anecdote, do you want to give the summary on that for someone who missed it?
To be clear, like these are founders. This is what you say, Ashley. It's like share these stories after you've made it.
From a position of strength, yeah.
From a position of strength. And I think Cloudflare is a successful company, and a lot of early investors who pass on them would say that that was a miss. And so, he shared a story about having dinner with Vinod Khosla, and when his two co-founders went to the bathroom in the middle of dinner, Vinod leaned over and said, like, "We think you're great. We think your co-founders are not as good." I forgot what the details were. Like he basically offered like better terms, or maybe he
was like, "We'll lead your round if you get rid of them."
Yeah, if you get rid of them,
and we'll give you their equity.
And frankly, like that's not an uncommon story. Like I think that founders will probably have some versions of these stories, like where investors are meddling, right? Like, "Oh, I'm an owner in this company, and this is what I think is best." And so he said he was so turned off by that, that he, that's where like sort of the conversation ended. And Vinod, called him many times, and then eventually had to block his number. And that was a crazy story. I think people were like, "Oh my gosh, that's wild." And then people started sharing more Vinod stories. I think then Vinod got on socials and basically just started like either refuting some stories or saying like, that's just the way it is. And in the background of all this, like a thought that I personally had, but I think others did too, was sort of the Midas list just came out last week or 2 weeks ago. He's like still top of the Midas list. And something that I think 2025, if I were to summarize 2025 and so much of the pod content that we recorded was like, wow, we really excuse a lot of bad behavior as long as you win, right? Like the whole deal rippling thing that seemed so scandalous at the time, nobody even remembers because Deal continues to crush. And it felt like
Deal passed $1 billion ARR and all is forgiven.
Yes. And like a lot of bad behavior by VCs that have been called out through the years, or maybe like cancel culture from 10 years ago or whatever. Like it's all excused because those folks are like clearly dominating in the AI era. And so my thought was like, well, Vinod, maybe he's allowed to do whatever he wants if he's continuing to dominate. And then when he sort of refuted pieces or maybe all of Matthew's story, Matthew comes back out again and says like, that's not true. And here's literally the term sheet you gave me after that conversation. So like he saved the receipts. Also, I think Matthew tends to be like a very controversial figure on Twitter, but I thought he was nothing but respectful and not like instigating in this. He was just sharing a story. At least maybe, I read it innocently. And it was only when Vinod like sort of defended himself or sort of told his version of events that he came out with receipts that seemed like a little bit antagonistic. But that to me has extended the cycle of this particular meme.
I think I've seen Matthew do this, and I agree. He has like a high tolerance for controversy and
online pain,
which I think we actually all need if we're going to participate in this like chaotic town square. But he has like repeatedly done a lot to shine a light on Michelle, his co-founder and CTO, and so it was like this story coming from her would not have worked as well, right? Like you never want to be the subject of someone else's bias or and so it was like cool that Matthew did this. And he also, he named names 3 times. Like the first story he shared was pitching Sequoia, and Sequoia saying like Sequoia partners saying we don't believe a woman can like run your tech organization, something along those lines. The second one was not a like gotcha towards A16Z. It was more of a some self-reflection where they went to go talk to Mark Andreessen and like didn't realize it was a formal pitch. They just kind of like thought it was going to be a chat, and they show up as the entire partnership, and they didn't have any slides prepared. And so that was kind of like, oh my gosh, we didn't really understand the game. And so I appreciated that there was some like levity too. And
he said he framed the rejection letter. Which was also funny.
And then he also had that receipt. Like he shared that. So, and it's fun because I think there's so much appetite for this stuff because you just don't usually get access. And it's funny, I was trying to think of when we have had access, and the story I remembered was the insane Sequoia blog post about the SBF FTX pitch that they later like took off their website because it was once FTX imploded and SBF was like in legal trouble. It didn't look so good. He was like playing a video game during it, and he was like, you can buy a banana with FTX. Like, it's like it was so gushing. And then in hindsight, it was a little cringe. And so anyways, like we're not usually treated to these behind the scenes views. I fully agree with what you said, that like I think Vinod gets to be a sort of big controversial character. He is on Twitter. You wouldn't expect him to be, or on stage, you wouldn't expect him to be anything else. And I would imagine, based on what I know of Mark Andreessen, that like pitching him is probably a wild experience. And like all of these sort of titans of industry, many of them have very big personalities. And they're going to miss some things. And I think that's just part of the game. And so it's like, I think of this as more as like entertaining versus like an indictment. There were stories of truly bad behavior, right? Of VCs saying they were going to lead rounds, and then at the last minute, like pulling out, or like, I saw one where it was like they were going to do 5 million and they changed it to 100K. Like that's really bad. But just being a big, wild personality. And it's actually funny that Mark and Vinod are both former founders and CEOs themselves. It's like, this is a trait we admire in founders. And so when they turn into investing, it's not like they're going to turn that off. So anyways, I think it was fun, mostly fun to see these stories. And there were only a few that actually like horrified me.
I think VC Brags did like a roundup, but like to me, the takeaway was that there are founder-friendly eras and there are more investor-friendly eras, and it just goes back and forth. So depending on when the story is from, it's really like the context of what era it was from is actually quite important. Twitter's very limited, the characters and the sort of like lack of nuance, it's perfect for just shock value for some of these stories without the context. But I think that it's the same with companies. There's a version of this for companies and offers and behavior between candidates and employers as well. And so I just think that it more speaks to like that part of the cycle, with the exception of, I think, if you are like a tier one fund where, like through the cycles, you sort of have a little bit more stability and power. I mean, I think that the most egregious stories were kind of no-name investors, or like investors who don't have a really strong brand having bad behavior, right? Like there's almost like a quadrant where it's like strength of brand of investor and then like behavior. The spiciest one is obviously when the brand is good and the behavior is bad, right? And so anyways, we'll see more moments like this.
We're in a kind of a weird moment now where like the big VC firms have never been more powerful, right? Like there are a small number of firms that have just sucked up all of the capital and, are true kingmakers or whatever. But it's also true on the company side that, there's extreme capital concentration and consensus around a smaller number of companies that have like those founders have a lot of power. And it was interesting to think about this in the wake of, there were stories about Anthropic's last fundraise and how Dario had a bias against
people who would pass on earlier rounds.
Firms that passed on him earlier. And it's like, oh yeah, like if you are, I mean, obviously if you're Dario, you have all the power in the world, but like there are a smaller handful of founders who have like a lot of power right now because there's, sort of just a broader belief that few companies, and I think we're about to see this, are going to drive the vast majority of the liquidity in the industry. And so yes, it's just like, it's like the classic like power imbalance, but we have these extremes right now that we've never had, before in prior eras. And so that's sort of making this more interesting.
Yes. And there was a little kick up of GPs sharing like, abhorrent LP behavior, as they're pitching them. And then also GPs sharing like, sometimes founders are not, perfect actors either. And, I think those are stories that are less frequently told, especially I think the founder side.
Totally. It was funny. I tweeted something very vague about how like I've had a few really bad experiences being pitched by founders. But I just like chalk that up to accidental diligence. And it's like the best thing that can happen is someone behaves poorly during a sort of fundraise. And so you get to take that into consideration. And I immediately had 3 reporters reach out to me. It wasn't even a tweet. Like it wasn't even a tweet that did well. It was like a very bland, nothing tweet. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like obviously I'm not going to dish on any of this because I think the incentives actually are very like misaligned there. And
one place my head went where, which is kind of sad and maybe it's tangential, but it's like, I haven't had any horrible founder meetings. However, I do have a whole collection of extremely aggressive pitches and almost like to the level of stalking. And I feel like a lot of female investors have similar stories. And there's actually one firm that I know of where like it did actually result in physical stalking. And one of these GPs is like absolutely invisible on socials, and she's trying to like build a firm while being completely invisible online because she's fearful for her family's safety.
That's awful.
So that's to me like less like abhorrent founder behavior in a pitch, and like clearly there's like mental illness. So there's like some, there are unhinged people, and so for her to have to completely change her behavior and like limit herself to not get in the get attention from this is crazy. But like we all kind of have that, right? It's like a founder reaches out, they pitch you don't respond, and they follow up 7 times, and each time it's like this escalating, and that's fine, but it's like an anger.
But there are lines.
Yeah,
there's a gray area where you're like, okay, like you're just really passionate, and then it can tip over.
Oh, totally.
Some of the founder stories I saw that were like, in my mind, a little bit more benign, to me, like really flowed out of just the weirdness of pitch meetings. Like, you come to a lot of firms have a partner meeting at a set time. It's usually on Monday, and they can like slot teams in to come pitch them. And founders, have their deck and they go in and they present their deck and they answer questions. The thing I think that is less visible is like all of the stuff that happens behind the scenes around that and all of the different ways decisions are made within firms. I mean, maybe that one GP was asleep because his vote doesn't count and he knows it. Like rarely are VC firms, super transparent about like, we have a voting model and, each person has this many votes. And if you tip over into this, we do that. Like, that's just like these sort of internal behind the scenes workings. Or some firms say that they're egalitarian and anyone can make a decision, but actually it's only like a few people's opinion and decision making that really matters. And so I think some of those decision making dynamics can manifest strangely in meetings in ways that don't make sense to a founder who's coming in and, and just sort of pitching as prescribed. And so it's like the sort of secret sauce of every VC firm. But sometimes it's like quite convoluted and the power dynamics are quite strange and the founders don't really know how they're being assessed or whose opinion in the room actually matters.
Well, so like I'm interested in what happens. Like, let's say that, these OpenAI and Anthropic IPOs are extremely successful and the early investors in those companies are heroes. And, we really hold up the ideal sort of like founder funder relationship. Like, I wonder if that changes the dynamic on some of these stories and how that will impact the power and who benefits in terms of like sort of sharing these things.
I also wonder too if like, I wouldn't be surprised if even the format of how decisions are getting made. I doubt Dario went and pitched anyone's partner meeting for the latest round. And for some of these really hot companies, I think a lot of these fundraisers are being preempted. And so it'll be interesting to see if that sort of like traditional pitch model evolves over time. And if they're like, oh, we're going to slot you in for how does 2 Mondays from now look? Like if that even can survive the pace and velocity and sort of like FOMO of this phase and venture. And that could be both good in that like, founders don't have to do their song and dance and then traditional circus, but it could also be bad that a lot less diligence done, a lot more, sort of this looks sexy, let's do it. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we lose some of the rich storytelling around these pitches because they're just not happening in this way anymore.
All these like open questions we have, we're going to like find out the answers to really soon. And it'll be a busy summer and kind of fun to see where all of this goes.
No summer slowdown in 2026. Some hot IPO summer.
All right. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Great Chat. Have questions for us? Make sure to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. See you next week.